Let's get back inside. We're in the middle of page Kuf Ayin Gimel. Because of the interruption, all that, we'll begin from the line that begins Lepoishtoi. That's just above the middle of the page. And what we are doing now is pointing out that we have the moshel of the name, of the Shem. We have a similar inyan in the hislapshus of the nefesh in the guf. Clearly, everything that occurs in the guf is totally nefesh dependent, and representative of nefesh. Whether it is a seichel, whether it is emotions, whether it is machshava, dibur, or maisa, on the lowest level of maisa, to make a step of everything is nefesh. And from that preface, we will understand the various madregas, various levels of the nefesh presence in the various aspects of a person's activities, so to speak. So the first and highest is when the nefesh is mislabish in the guf, and the guf comes to life. And this hislapshus is in the manner, the guf is like a garment, it's not nefesh. But this hislapshus is such that there cannot be any interruption for that relationship. It has to be constant, and it cannot be divested and reintroduced. You can't remove the garment and put on the garment again, or put on a different garment. So this garment, this relationship between the guf and the nefesh, is an allusion, is similar to the name, to the Etzem Hashem. Etzem Hashem, as we explained, as we learned it, the essential element of name, that comes together with the person being a human being. It's also only a name, only a presence of the person, not the person himself. But that presence he cannot divest himself of. And this is similar to the levush haguf, that the nefesh is mechaya the guf, and that is an absolute relationship. The nefesh is present in the world via the fact that it is mechaya the guf. Then there is oisis hamachshava. That's where we're going to start and try to go through it. Oisis hamachshava, the oisis of thought. Now, what is the point? What is the emphasis of oisis hamachshava, the oisis of thought?
This is another mashal. We're moving away from nefesh and guf to talk about oisius and machshava.
Which is machshava is also nefesh and guf. Nefesh and guf at a lower level. at a more expressed level. How would a person think because he has a nefesh in his guf?
Okay.
The highest that the nefesh is mislabish in the guf, the first level of the garment, even though it's a garment and the guf is a separate thing from the nefesh, but what is actually represented, what is expressed by the fact that the nefesh is in the guf, the very element of nefesh, chayes. There aren't, so to speak, two things. We have the effect of the nefesh, and then we have the nefesh. We have the effect of the nefesh itself, the highest that is mislabish in nefesh. You'll see what I mean by effect. Then there is machshava, thought. Thought also has a motivating factor. What makes you think? What's the content of the thought? What is the seichel, whether it's seichel or midas, or any experience, any sensitivity, that makes a person think.
What's recontent?
What?
Recontent?
I don't hear.
So just content.
Oh,
What do you say?
I didn't hear a word. Recontent and the content of the thought.
The content of the thought. Thought has a force behind it that motivates the thinking. That force, now as a seichel and the midas, that's nefesh itself. As we pointed out yesterday, that seichel is a nefesh element. But then, the thinking itself, the activity of thinking, is motivated by this element, by the seichel, or by the content. But the activity, this seichel in thought is mislabish in oisiyos. What is oisiyos? Oisiyos is a sense that this seichel is now identifiable in a manner that you can take it and transplant it elsewhere. It becomes a mitzias. The seichel itself, that which the oyer ha-seichel, that remains connected to the nefesh. But this is mislabish in the oisiyos. And oisiyos give it a presence. Such a presence that, as we point out, you could say these letters without knowing what you're saying. And these are letters that originated from that seichel. So let's not talk about when you say the oasis without knowing one thing. That's a completely different level. But even oasis, when they're living oasis, when the oasis are actually representing the very seichel. They are they contain the seichel, and they are enlivened by the seichel, but they are a separate mitzias. So here we're in the very same nefesh. These oisias also exist only because there is a nefesh behind them. You can't think without a nefesh, it's obvious. Just like you can't have seichel without a nefesh, you can't think oisias without a nefesh. But this is where the nefesh is extended out to a mitzias that is not nefesh, that is separate from nefesh. This is an allusion in our moshe from the name, but the name is applied to an object, to a property. As we explained there, that also is truly the name of the person. It's an extension. It's an expansion of the person. But it's mislabish. It's attached to something outside, a separate mitzvah. Same thing is in from machshava. Oisi is a machshava. That's the emphasis. Oisi is a machshava. In machshava itself, there is the sense of the chayas hanefesh. There is a sense of the seichel that is being contemplated. That is mamash nefesh. But there is the oisi. These oisiyos are separate, in a sense, from the seichel. But these oisiyos also are representative of nefesh. They're there only because the nefesh is mislabish in these oisiyos. So now we're going and identify clearly the difference between the nefesh as it is in voices and machshava, and the nefesh as it is in the group. So he says, "V'oisei hamachshava, harei ze levush." This is a garment sheyochel lifshet oisei, a garment that he can divestment, he can remove it. As the pasuk says, "V'kavush tachlifim," like a garment, you exchange them, which means shepoish et esatzmei mimachshava, that a person can address them, remove, divest himself of one thought, and he puts on a different machshava. He changes a garment. So that garment, this ois is a machshava. Even though nefesh is actually melubish in these oisis and machshava. And it actually is representative of nefesh. Yet he can divest himself of this machshava and put on a different machshava, which means that this connection between the oises and machshava and the nefesh is not a direct connection, because nefesh is there constantly. Nefesh cannot change. Like we said, the nefesh is in the guf is constant. And here the oises and machshava have nefesh, but it's not on this, and it's not a constancy in the same. And there's a separateness between the nefesh and the garment and the oises and machshava. And the proof is that you can stop thinking about this and think about something else. Even though that thought itself is actually nefesh.
Are we saying that oisius are from within? Or is it?
Oisius, there are different levels of oisius, and there is a level of oisius that come from within the seichel.
And that's what we mean here with machlifim oisius machshava. Is exchanging these inner garments or outer garments, or
no, even the inner garment of machshava can be exchanged.
And this shows that they're separate from the nefesh.
That's right. And again, just like in the case of the name is applied to a property, and then the property is sold, and a different name is applied to the property. The name, while it is applied to the property, is the name of the person. It's a real connection. The similar is in this machshava, oisis and machshava, that they oisis that come from the nefesh. The nefesh is mislabish in these oisis, and then it can be exchanged and other oisis come in their place. And yet, while the nefesh is thinking there's oisis, this is oisis coming from the nefesh.
If we think of oisius literally letters, so when a person begins to learn to read and write, these are presented to him from outside. here these letters are internal, they're letters of our own making.
The letters that he is learning to read and write are not, let me go straight to it, are the formal letters. Letters for interchange between people. This is not letters that permit the nefesh to express itself.
Okay, but the reason the Rebbe is choosing, or that we have in Chassidus, Oisios HaMachshava, what are we to understand here?
Okay. A child, before he was to Cheder, he learned ACS. Does he think? Does he think with letters?
Before he becomes literate?
Before he becomes literate.
Presumably he has, I don't know, that's what I'm asking, presumably he has Oisios de Machshava, maybe he has his own letters of thought, or maybe he gains them at home. I'm trying to work out what's
okay.
meaning here.
Not the kind of letters that he's learning in Cheder.
Yeah.
Sure,
No,
he doesn't
He's not thinking with the kind of letters that he hasn't learned yet.
But he's thinking with letters.
What does that mean?
It means, as we explained the other day, before we had this interruption, anything that we have in machshava is what's called conscious knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Conscious knowledge means identifiable knowledge. Identifiable knowledge means that it has a keli. Oisius, whatever the oisius are.
Mm-hmm.
I want this, I want this, I want this. These are all oisius.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like Dibur inside of Machshava?
This is like Dibur inside the machshava.
He starts to think when he identifies things separate than himself.
Right, and even identifying himself can be mitosis. Like they say, they watch a baby, they say the baby found its toe.
Baby what?
Found its toe. You know, baby suckles a toe, the finger. This is all a conscious, on the baby level, definitely a conscious thing. This is how the baby develops its thought.
So now it sounds like through identifying things outside itself, things that are distinct.
Not outside itself necessarily. As I said, the toe is identifying things as a real entity.
As a real entity, so it's relational. There's some inner reality. And here it says, here's a toe, here's a cup. Sort of identifying.
A baby is crying because it needs to be nursed. It doesn't know that it needs to be nursed. It knows that it's something is uncomfortable and it cries. Okay? Then the baby grows a little bit and it's crying, presumably for the very same reason. But at that point you can tell the baby, don't cry, I'm getting you the body. The baby stops crying. Which means at this point it has thought. It knows what it is that it's asking for. Even though the initial quest is also natural, the same way as an earlier stage, but it becomes conscious of it.
As what?
As an earlier stage. All right. So this is called Oisiz HaMachshava. And Oisiz HaMachshava is also nefesh, but this is an alavush that he can yochel lifsh et is machshava or belevish machshava acheres. Or mikol moklei. Yet still, the focusing on machshava, even though he can exchange the machshava. However, harei ha-machshava mishetet estomid. The machshava flutters all the time. There is not a moment in a person's life that machshava does not actively um, 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 affect him. That is not that it doesn't have a machshava floating through his mind, an active machshava. Rak except shepoishet v'loivish. He can remove one machshava and put another machshava. Avol, but efshel li is bli machshava. It's impossible to be without machshava. Even though there is a distinct level, there is the chayes hanefesh, and the nefesh gives chayes to the guf, and then there is the chayes hanefesh that, as you say, comes into machshava, that it becomes conscious chayes. What is conscious chayes versus chayes per se? When you're asleep and somebody comes and touches you, it doesn't disturb you, it just touches you. You respond. Why do you respond? It didn't trouble you. Because of this machshava element. Because you were conscious. You were conscious even though you were sleeping. You're conscious of your presence. When somebody touches you, he interrupts your trend of thought as you were involved in yourself, and he calls your attention to his touch. And you respond. Perhaps it could be said that this is the difference, God forbid, if the person is in a coma, where he doesn't wake up by touch, doesn't wake up by screaming, because he's still alive, but he doesn't have a consciousness of his life. And he doesn't respond to being called, to being touched, or anything like that. A normal person under normal circumstances, in all states of normal living, he is consciously involved.
That's what it means that the Ayin is constant.
Huh?
Because the consciousness is constant.
Yes. And he cannot be without machshava. In other words, there cannot be a living body where he is conscious, when there's a presence, without machshava. Machshava is his definition of the person's presence.
If the life is originating with a neshama, which is constantly enlivening the guf.
Abik pointed out the person can be alive and not conscious.
Right. I'm trying. What is this conscious element?
He's aware that he's alive. That's a conscious element.
And how does that go with
There's no keli for the nefesh at that point? There's no kelim for the nefesh is there, just there's no
The nefesh, the keli for the nefesh is the guf. And the nefesh is the slavish in the guf and gives life. But there's no keli to the next level, to the functioning level.
Where? In which case?
machshava for the person.
When the person is not
It's common.
in a coma, for instance. The life element is there, but the functional element is not there.
what? Why is thought
Does it-
constant? Why can't you
Can the
just be
person
alive?
be dreaming in a state of coma? When the person is in a coma.
In the state of coma, I'm not an expert on this, but in the state of coma, the thought is not related to the body. The nefesh is alive and well, and his seichel is still functional, but independent of the guf. It's not transmitting it to the guf. Yes, what did you say? When does it be constant?
All right. Why can't he just be experiencing? I'm alive. What's the thought element? I'm not getting.
For the guf to be alive, what does that mean?
I guess activity, right? It can't just be.
The nefesh is, but for the guf, you should live at the level of the guf. It has to be machshava.
Because that's like the kind of minimum activity.
That's the minimum. That's right. That's the first level. It said the guf is alive. I mean, there is life in the guf because the nefesh is mislavish in the guf, but that's not the guf is alive.
And chokhmah is like a moment in that thought. We call it a spark. It's sort of in a way above active machshava.
Yes, chokhmah is part of nefesh,
Fine. Chokhmah is part of nefesh, no.
and then it reveals itself in the guf. But machshava is the living at the level of the guf.
Well, chokhmah, we says the first.
When you touch a person that is asleep and he wakes up, it's not because his neshama is in the guf, but because he's consciously aware that he's alive. That's what we say. That's a response.
That's why he responds. Chokhmah, we said before, is the first moment of consciousness. It's not tainug and ratzon. It's
First moment of identifying with the nefesh, identifying what nefesh is.
so it's a kind of truth in thought.
Yes, it's a truth in thought, right? It's not
It's not living on the body
it's
level.
not living at the body level.
Bina is more machshava.
Well, all seichel, all midas is all part of nefesh.
So machshava is really below,
Machshava is a lavush, it's a garment.
lower than.
This level goes back to the level of the name on the object.
Right.
But this idea that it is constant, this is not consistent with that mashal, the name on the object, or it is.
It is consistent. Just as in the machshava, there is the union that he can exchange thoughts. The name of the object, the name can be removed from the object, and the object acquires a different name, and his name will apply to something else. What does it mean if it applies to something else? As we explained, this union that the name is on the object is a principle that the human being has a presence in the world. That presence remains.
So whatever he owns, that presence going to spread out to whatever he owns.
Is expressed in something, and then the presence is there. Like we said, the halacha is dala shalom kodesh.
So even if he owns nothing, it still spreads out.
It's still
the
there.
Dalet Amos is called by his name.
It's called by his name. That presence is still there. Even if he owns nothing. Perhaps this is the reason when you see a person in the gutter, you are disturbed. Hey, this is a full-fledged human being. How can you be in the gutter? He's got a real presence. You know what I'm saying? A real name, a real presence, and it's totally, he's totally oblivious to it. Like I said, a person walking on 4 instead of walking on 2. Mitzvot Efshar Liyois B'li Machshava. It's impossible to be without machshava, meaning it's impossible to have a neshama presence in the goof, in terms of a presence, that the goof actually is alive, and experience and identifies with his nefesh, with life, without machshava. And there is not a moment that a person does not identify with life. Okay, we have to interrupt. All right, this is it for this morning. I don't know if anybody's online. I didn't hear anybody come on. Okay, we'll reconvene with some Sunday morning as usual. Have a good day. And good Shabbat.
Na 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 na